daily lives that will change history. 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 That will be the most beautiful day.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning in this evening for our weekly Intel report for the week of April 5th, 2023. Glad to see everybody tuning in this evening. Seen quite a few familiar faces here. Some people we haven't seen for a while, as well as a few new people as well in the chat tonight. Good to see it. Good to see it. If you guys haven't already, make sure to smash that like button. Hit the like button real quick for us. It's the best way to get the algorithm's attention. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. It's the best way to support the channel. It's also the only way to get access to the live chat over on YouTube there. Ryan, how's it going tonight? Doom Pie, good to see you. Benny Hill, Mike Barry, good to see you. Epi, as always, it's good to see our favorite Scotsman hanging out in the live chat with us. Good to see you, Epi. Itchy the Killer, always good to see you. Patty Whack, good to see you as well. Pepe, good to see you. Samuel Norris, good to see you. Says here from Texas. Good to see we got some Texans tuning in this evening. Shazzer, good to see you as well. Ookton, always good to see you. Shake the hands. Says all like. Yes, if we could all hit that like button really quick, guys. It only takes a second. Be highly appreciated. Casey, good to see you. Says, hey, Nemico, mate. Casey, not sure if you're from Australia or New Zealand, but if you are, thank you so much for tuning in this evening. Either way, thank you for tuning in tonight. Rakasan, good to see you, says present. CDY MLR says howdy. Good to see you. Not sure how I'm supposed to pronounce that, but I think I did a good job reading that name off there. Daniel Mack says hi from New Zealand. Awesome to see that we have some New Zealanders and some Australians tuning in this evening. Patty Whack says good to see you, Nemico. Good to see you as well. Patty Whack. Scallywag 007 says hey to you. Scallywag. Kitty Gundy, good to see you back here. Itchy the Killer. Seb B, thank you so much, says hi from NATO rejects Sweden. Well, you're not a reject here, Seb. Thank you so much for tuning in this evening. We're going to get started tonight, of course, with our primary headlines. First, we go through our primary Ukraine headlines, then we'll kind of open that up to our global security and kind of our global security environment and look at everything that's going on across the globe here, all the major headlines. From there, we'll move on to looking at our community aggregated reports from our Situation Room over on the Discord server. Speaking of which, if you don't know, we do have a Discord community server. There's a link to that where you can join that down in the description below. We're glad to have you. We'd be happy to have you over there on the Discord server. For those that don't know, we are dual streaming both Twitch and YouTube. So for those that are tuning in on Twitch tonight, thank you so much for hanging out with us this evening, and make sure to hit that follow button. If you're not into Twitch, you can always view us over on YouTube, or vice versa. If you're not into YouTube, you can always hop over onto Twitch and view us over on that platform, because we stream on both platforms simultaneously. Make sure to comment in the live chat, or if you're watching this as a video, as we do upload this as a video every evening after we're done with these reports. We do upload them to the YouTube channel. But make sure to comment, and if you like this content, share it. It's the best way to get this information in the hands of more people. It's important that we keep people informed as to what is going on in the world. Today, we have a poll. I guess I should mention this. We have a live chat poll going in the live chat this evening. If you haven't already, cast your vote in the live chat poll, because at the end of the show, we'll end that poll and we'll talk about the results. Tonight's poll question is, do you think Russia will retaliate for Finland joining NATO in some shape or form? I don't get into the specifics of what that retaliation could be, but Nevertheless, I kind of want to hear a yes or no answer from the community here as to what you guys think. Do you think Russia is actually going to follow through and kind of retaliate in some form here? Or do you think it's all just rhetoric? Ukton says, thank you, Nemico. Great to see you. Great to see you, Ukton. Epi says, always great to see the Nemico reports on YouTube. It's always great to see Epi in the live chat. Thank you so much for stopping by tonight. Doompai says, good to hear from you again, Nemico. Good to see you, Doompai. Hope you're doing all right. Hope everybody is doing okay today. So without further ado, I think we're going to jump into our primary Ukraine reports here this evening. We're gonna kind of go back into the past week or so of what's been going on in Ukraine, get everybody updated on the situation. Our main headline topic tonight, of course, is Finland joining NATO and Russia making those subsequent threats. We'll get into that after we start with our primary Ukraine headlines here. I'm going to switch over to our main battle map here so we can get kind of an idea of what's going on the ground in Ukraine today. So if you look at the map here, this is our eastern front, so to speak, and your southern front here. But this is what the situation in Ukraine looks like at this very moment. Again, for those that don't know, green is Ukrainian. It's territory that the Ukrainians have taken back from the Russians. The red is all territory, Ukrainian territory, that the Russians currently hold. Of course, the focus has been in these eastern regions here, centered around Edvidka and around Bakhmut as well. Which, scroll out here. Let's get you zoomed in on Bakhmut here, which, again, the Russians have been slowly chipping away at here for months now. You can see them starting to encircle that city of Bakhmut. We'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of that here in just a few moments. Vladimir Zelensky has said that Ukrainian troops face a difficult situation in that eastern city of Bakhmut, but that Kyiv will take the corresponding decisions to protect them if they risk being encircled by Russian forces, which no doubt, again, you can see on the map here, is beginning to unfold. The Ukrainian president, at a news conference in Poland, said Kyiv's troops in Bakhmut sometimes advanced a little only to be pushed back by Russian forces, but that they remained inside the city at this time. I know we've seen videos posted by Wagner, them raising flags inside Bakhmut. We've seen all sorts of false claims that the city of Bakhmut has been taken by the Russians. That's not true at this very moment. There are still Ukrainians on the ground there in Bakhmut. There is still fighting ongoing. But no doubt the Russians have been making progress here in kind of chipping away at those Ukrainian defenders around the city of Bakhmut. You can see them beginning to encircle that region there on our battle map. Zelensky and Ukraine's First Lady, Olena Zelenska, were welcomed in Warsaw, Poland, with military honors, tributes, and praise from Poland's president, who awarded Zelensky with Poland's oldest and highest civilian distinction, the Order of the White Eagle. Poland, meanwhile, will send 14 MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine. Duda said at a joint news appearance with Zelensky, that's the Polish president. Zelensky thanked the Polish leader, government, and people for standing, quote, shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine and giving fleeing Ukrainians shelter. No doubt Poland has sheltered, I would say, the majority of refugees leaving Ukraine, fleeing Ukraine. We know Mehmet, back earlier in the war, he fled to Poland. Dasha, his cat, even fled to Poland. Some of you might remember Mehmet and his cat Dasha there. And so we saw what those borders looked like earlier in the war, and even what they continue to look like it's during some times here along the Polish-Ukrainian border as refugees go across that border into Poland to find asylum, to find safety. And still to this day, there are people fleeing Ukraine. There are a lot of people coming back into Ukraine that fled during the early days of the war and have since come back or are coming back as we speak. But there are still people that are fleeing the country altogether, and that continues to be An issue that countries are dealing with along the border with Ukraine, taking in these civilians and finding shelter for them, finding places for them to live. There's been kind of a mass exodus, so to speak, from Ukraine since the war began. Of course, I should mention, that there has been a lot of civilians that have moved back into the country, of course, especially to some of those areas that the Ukrainians have retook in recent months. Poland's agriculture minister has formally resigned from his post, saying he decided to quit the position due to the European Commission's decision to extend duty-free imports for Ukrainian grain until June of 2024. Polish farmers had called for the introduction of tariffs. Export bottlenecks caused by Russia's invasion mean large quantities of these Ukrainian grains, which are cheaper than those produced in the European Union, have ended up in Central European states, hitting prices and sales of local farmers. So there's, kind of some ups and downs here dealing with this situation here over this Ukrainian grain. Meanwhile, France's President Emmanuel Macron is in China with President of the European Commission Ursula von der Leyen. Speaking to journalists, the French leader said anyone helping, quote, the aggressor Russia in Ukraine conflict would become, quote, an accomplice. He added that it was not in China's interest to provide weapons to Russia in its war against Ukraine. We'll talk a little bit more about the French president's visit there in China later in the show. Big shout out to Paul Fiacca. Good to see you. Mike Berry, Kitty Gundy. To everybody that's tuning in tonight. Again, we're just getting started with our main Ukraine headlines here. Moving on, Russian President Vladimir Putin has attended a ceremony at the Kremlin where he met the new ambassadors to Moscow and accepted their diplomatic credentials. Among the 17 new ambassadors attending the ceremony on Wednesday was Lynn Tracy, the U.S.'s new ambassador to Russia. Putin told Tracy in an address that U.S. support for a revolution in Ukraine in 2014 had led to the current situation where Russia and Ukraine were in conflict. Meanwhile, the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, also known as the IAEA, Rafael Grossi, has met Russian officials in Kaliningrad for talks on the Moscow-held Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in southern Ukraine. As you very well may know, there's been kind of a crisis going on there since the Russians invaded last year. As they've fought over this territory that this nuclear power plant sits on. I know some of you may remember the night that the Russians first took the power plant. We watched that live unfold from their security cameras at the plant here on our live stream. This is still an ongoing situation here around this plant. A Ukrainian drone has crashed near the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. Russia's RIA news agency cited a Russian officer as saying on Wednesday, as the chief of the global nuclear watchdog was expected in Russia for talks on that plant's security. International Atomic Energy Agency head Rafael Grossi was due to travel to Russia's Kaliningrad region on Wednesday, a week after visiting the Zaporizhzhia facility in southern Ukraine, again, which is still controlled by Russian forces to this day. The 6 Leopard 2A4 tanks Spain promised to send to Ukraine will leave the country in the second half of April. Defense Minister Margarita Robles told state broadcaster TVE on Wednesday, pushing back the estimated shipment date. The German-made battle tanks have not been used since the 1990s and have been mothballed in reserve, requiring refitting and battle readiness tests after initial doubts as to whether they could go into combat again. I know we've seen lots of images of those tank graveyards, those tank warehouses where a lot of them sit in disarray. It takes a lot of work to get those back up and operational. GoFlow, nice to see you. Mother Saki, thank you for tuning in on Twitch tonight. Good to see you as well. Turkey's foreign minister has said Sweden needs to take further steps for Ankara to ratify its NATO membership bid. They also told reporters they had discussed Sweden's NATO bid and developments regarding Ankara's purchase of F-16 fighter jets with the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Meanwhile, in Washington, the U.S. has unveiled $2.6 billion more in military assistance for Zelensky's government on Tuesday, including 3 air surveillance radars, anti-tank rockets, and fuel trucks. Trevor Harriet says, glad I made it. Glad to see you made it as well, Trevor. We're just starting our Ukraine headlines here. We're in the midst of it now. In our big news tonight, Finland became the 31st member of NATO Tuesday after its foreign minister, Pekka Haavisto, signed an accession document and handed it to U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken at a ceremony in Brussels. Sergei Shoigu, Russia's defense minister, said the accession of Finland increased the risks of wider conflict. U.S. President Joe Biden welcomed Finland's accession and urged Turkey and Hungary to conclude the ratification process for Sweden to join as well. We'll have more about Finland's joining of NATO later in tonight's show, so stick around for that. Ukraine hopes to receive 2 more tranches worth $1.8 billion from the International Monetary Fund this year under its new approved 4-year lending program. Top Ukrainian central bank officials said on Tuesday, Ukraine this week received the first $2.7 billion under the program, which is part of a bigger $115 billion global package of support. Meanwhile, news out of the UK, Britain has blocked the UN webcast of an informal Security Council meeting on Ukraine on Wednesday, at which Russia's Commissioner for Children's Rights is due to speak. The International Criminal Court wants to arrest the Commissioner on war crime charges. Such meetings are not held in the Security Council chamber, and all 15 Council members have to agree to allow it to be webcast by the United Nations. For those that don't know, Russia has taken its turn as president of the UN Security Council, a move which most Western countries have shown quite a bit of backlash against. Major countries take turns as that president of that UN Security Council. I believe they change hands every month, if I'm not mistaken. The U.S., meanwhile, is trying to wreck Russia's planned summit with African countries as part of efforts to isolate Moscow. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said in an interview published on Tuesday, Moscow is preparing for its second summit with African countries scheduled for the end of July in St. Petersburg. Meanwhile, Ukrainian soldier pleaded partially guilty on Tuesday at Russia's first trial for war crimes in connection with its military campaign in Ukraine. Russian investigators formally charged on Tuesday Daria Trepova, a 26-year-old woman, with terrorism offenses over the killing of the pro-war military blogger Vladin Tatarsky in a bomb blast in St. Petersburg. We'll have more about that later in tonight's show. In our last Ukraine main headline here, Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershikovich, who was arrested and charged with espionage in Russia last week, met with his lawyers for the first time on Tuesday. Editor-in-Chief Emma Tucker said in a message to staff, Evan's health is good and he is grateful for the outpouring of support from around the world. Tucker said in the letter, a copy of which was seen by Reuters. With that, we'll now move on to our global headlines here, kind of broaden the scope a little bit. With that, we will switch over to our main screen here so I can show you guys what we'll be looking at. Our first article this evening comes from AP News. It talks about Finland joining NATO in that major blow to Russia over the Ukraine war. Finland joined the NATO military alliance Tuesday, dealing a major blow to Russian President Vladimir Putin with a historic realignment of Europe's post-Cold War security landscape, triggered by Moscow's invasion of Ukraine, which of course happened last year, February. The Nordic country's membership doubles Russia's border with the world's biggest security alliance. Finland had adopted neutrality after its defeat by the Soviets in World War II, but its leaders signaled they wanted to join NATO after Moscow's invasion of Ukraine sent a shiver of fear through its neighbors. Quote, "The era of non-alignment in our history has come to an end. A new era begins, President Sauli Niinisto said before his country's blue and white flag was raised outside NATO headquarters. A short distance away, outside the security fence, a few dozen people wrapped in flags of their own chanted, "Ukraine needs NATO." In praising Finland's membership, U.S. President Joe Biden noted it came on the 74th anniversary of the signing of NATO's founding treaty on April 4th, 1949. Quote, "When Putin launched his brutal war of aggression against the people of Ukraine, he thought he could divide Europe and NATO. He was wrong," Biden said in a statement. Quote, "Today we are more united than ever, and together, strengthened by our newest ally, Finland, we will continue to preserve transatlantic security, defend every inch of NATO territory, and meet any and all challenges we face." Russia warns NATO as Belarus sees nuclear upgrade on planes and missiles. It says here, Russia's defense minister Sergei Shoigu issued a threatening warning against NATO Tuesday as Finland officially joined the alliance and expanded the network. Finland and Sweden, which for years had passed on joining the military bloc, looked to join the then 30-member alliance following Russia's deadly invasion of Ukraine and its increasingly hostile rhetoric against European nations that oppose the illegal war. Joining NATO means Helsinki now enjoys the complete protection of the alliance if Russia were to strike Finland. Article 5 of the NATO Charter says an attack on all members, of course, will trigger a response from all members. So an attack on one is an attack on all. But despite Moscow's direct influence in Helsinki's decisions, Shoigu on Tuesday said the move could lead to further hostilities. Quote, "The North Atlantic Bloc is strengthening its anti-Russian course, which is leading to an escalation of the conflict," he said in an address to top military officials. According to a statement provided by Euromaidan Press, quote, "NATO is carrying out a set of measures to increase combat readiness of the joint armed forces, intensifying combat training and reconnaissance activities near the borders of Russia and Belarus." Shoigu pointed to NATO's membership expansion, the U.S. pledge of another $2.6 billion in military equipment Tuesday, and moves to send Ukraine warplanes as to what prompted Moscow to increasingly look to its sole regional ally, Belarus. Quote, "All this creates risk of significant expansion of conflict, but it will not affect the outcome of the special operation," he said. "Under these conditions, we are taking retaliatory measures defending the security of the Union state." Shoigu said Russia began training Belarusian troops Monday on ballistic missile systems, along with aircraft capable of deploying nuclear missiles. An article here from Reuters, Ukraine's Zelensky aims for Western warplane coalition. Russia's pressure on Bakhmut as well. So again, Reuters again is kind of paywalled here, so we're going to just read the first paragraph here or so. Kyiv, April 5th, from Reuters. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky said during a trip to Warsaw on Wednesday that Poland would help from a coalition of Western powers to supply warplanes to Kyiv, adding that Ukrainian troops were still fighting for Bakhmut in the east but could withdraw if they risked being cut off. Meanwhile, an elite Russian security officer who defected calls Putin a paranoid war criminal in an interview with NBC News here. We'll watch the video of that interview here just in a second. But it says here, a former officer with President Vladimir Putin's elite security unit has defected and labeled the Russian leader a, quote, paranoid war criminal who has lost his grip on reality. Gleb Karakulov said he served as captain and engineer in a field unit of the Presidential Communications Department, the Federal Linaya Sluzhba Karani, again, also known as the FSO, a little bit of a mouthful there to pronounce, so bear with me, or Federal Protective Service, one of the most secretive branches of the Russian security services. In a sweeping interview released Tuesday, he said that the Russian president has become increasingly paranoid and that he prefers to avoid airplanes and travels on a train that looks like a regular train that has been adapted for Putin's needs. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a moment, but I'd like to show you the video here from NBC News where he talks a little bit about this.
Никаких там бомбоубежищ не оборудовали. Вот, а тут, получается, находясь на территории другого государства, то есть это, ну, другое государство, Казахстан,
Хочу отметить, что и Кыргызстан, и Таджикистан относятся к нашим.
я считаю этого человека военно-преступником. Хоть я и не участвую именно в военных этих действиях, но исполнять его преступные приказы или просто хотя бы находиться у него на службе, я не считаю для себя это возможным. Для меня это большая сделка с совестью, я на такое не готов. Президент оторван от мира. Он живет в информационном коконе последнюю пару лет.
Basically saying here that President Putin is in an echo chamber, in an informational vacuum.
Большую часть времени он проводит именно в своих резиденциях, которые СМИ очень красноречиво называют бункерами. Он патологически боится за свою жизнь. Окружил себя непроходимым барьером из карантинов, из отсутствия информации любой, из интернета.
So again, he's saying Putin is basically in an informational vacuum here, and that he's quarantined himself. He's secluded himself into his private residences, which Russian state media again referred to as his bunkers. But that he's kind of quarantined himself not only from the outside world, but from information as well. From what I kind of gathered there. Post here from Reuters: U.S. And Britain walk out at the UN on Russia wanted for war crimes. Let's take a look at this video here from Reuters. Says here, Russian envoy speaks. Diplomats from the U.S., Britain, Albania, and Malta walk out of the UN meeting.
Наша встреча положит начало конструктивному обсуждению фактов, а не домыслов и беспочвенных обвинений.
This is a very great example of where relations are, globally, not just between the West and Russia, but globally between countries and Russia now. This is kind of how far relations have dwindled here. Where they're just literally walking out of UN Security Council meetings.
As Russia takes on the presidency of the Security Council, we will use every opportunity to push back on their using their perch in the chair to spread disinformation and to use their chair to push support of their efforts. So it's for that reason today that we have opposed their ARIA formula briefer, a woman who has been charged with war crimes, who has been involved in deporting and removal of children from their homes to Russia. And we strongly are opposed to that, and that's why we've joined the UK in blocking UN Web from being used to allow her to have an international podium to spread disinformation and to try to defend her horrible actions that are taking place in Ukraine.
So there you hear they also blocked the website end of things. So like the actual like live stream for these UN meetings was also blocked, as to basically cut her off from having any type of viewership and spreading what they said is misinformation. In a post here from Foreign Policy, this talks about the French president Emmanuel Macron visiting China. It says on Wednesday, French President Emmanuel Macron flew to Beijing to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping. The 3-day visit is expected to cover trade, Russia's war in Ukraine, and other issues. The European Union's relationship with China has been at an all-time low, but that hasn't stopped Paris from seeking high-level economic engagement with the world's second-largest economy. Since being elected president in 2017, Macron has visited China numerous times and signed agreements on green finance, intellectual property rights, and foreign investment. This week's trip aims to bolster these economic ties. 60 French business leaders are traveling with Macron, including the heads of Airbus and energy giant Electricité de France, while also preventing the Europe-China relationship from sinking any further. Quote, "It doesn't really strike me as a visit that moves the goalposts so much as it tries to maintain a certain degree of definitely economic but also diplomatic equilibrium," they say. That came from Rui Zhang, a program associate at the Wilson Center's Kissinger Institute on China and the United States. And a post here from the Financial Times. It says, Ukraine ready to talk to Russia on Crimea if counteroffensive succeeds. It says here, Kyiv is willing to discuss the future of Crimea with Moscow if its forces reach the border of the Russian-occupied peninsula, a top advisor to President Vladimir Zelensky has told the Financial Times. The comments by Andriy Shiiba, deputy head of Zelensky's office, are the most explicit statement of Ukraine's interest in negotiations since it cut off peace talks with the Kremlin last April. It says here, quote, "If we will succeed in achieving our strategic goals on the battlefield and when we will be on the administrative border with Crimea, we are ready to open a diplomatic page to discuss this issue," Shiba said, referring to Kyiv's long-planned counteroffensive. He added, quote, "It doesn't mean that we would exclude the way of liberation of Crimea by our armies." So they're not excluding the idea of them going into Crimea and liberating Crimea. Okay, they're just simply saying that when the time comes that they are on the border and they are in a position to do so, they've counteroffensived all the way to the border of the Crimean Peninsula. At that time, if they are in a position to do so, at that time, they will possibly join. They're open to join into talks with Russia over, some sort of negotiation here, over some sort of deal over the Crimean Peninsula. It says here, to date, Zelensky has ruled out peace talks until Russian forces leave all of Ukraine, including Crimea. So this is kind of different. They've kind of got a different direction here now, and they are going to be open to talks only once they're on that border with Crimea. Shiba is a veteran diplomat who focuses on foreign policy in the president's office and has been at Zelensky's side at key moments in the war. He said the president and his aides were now talking specifically about Crimea as Ukraine's army gets closer to launching its counteroffensive to regain territory. And a post here from The Guardian says Russian defector sheds light on Putin paranoia and his secret train network. The secret train network is really what we're interested in here the most. It was kind of an interesting topic here. It says here the 36-year-old said the train, which again is referring to Gleb Karakulov, the young man I just showed you a few moments ago in that interview with NBC. He says the train was used because it, quote, cannot be tracked on any information resource. It's done for stealth purposes. He says a powerful body tasked with protecting, so the Federal Protection Service, again, a powerful body tasked with protecting Russia's highest-ranking officials, said the measures were designed to mask the whereabouts of the Russian president, whom he describes, quote, pathologically afraid for his life. The Russian investigative outlet Projekt reported previously on the existence of the train and of a secret railway network, including parallel lines and stations near Putin's residences in Novo Ogorovio in the Moscow region and near his Bocharov Rochi residence in the Black Sea resort of Sochi. So he has these train networks. They're wired all in to his residences, so he could just literally leave his bunker, hop on a train, and go to another bunker somewhere else. The Guardian has reviewed an interview with Karabulov by the Dossier Center, a political information outfit founded by the exiled Russian billionaire Mikhail Khodorkovsky, and confirmed the credentials of the senior Russian communications engineer who traveled with Putin extensively and helped transmit some of his most secret messages. In some China news here, China is ghosting the United States. Secretary of State Antony Blinken wants to reschedule his date with China. Beijing is giving him the cold shoulder. So we know after the spy balloon situation, Antony Blinken canceled his visit to Beijing. Says here the Biden administration called off Blinken's planned trip to Beijing in February after a Chinese spy balloon traversed the U.S. skies, but has since been trying to restart high-level talks. That includes rescheduling the Blinken visit and setting up other trips by top U.S. officials and a phone call between President Joe Biden and Chinese leader Xi Jinping, a current U.S. official and a former State Department official said. But China is rebuffing the U.S. efforts, the people said, and its willingness to fully engage may hinge on the drama around Wednesday's meeting in California between Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen and Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Again, we'll talk about that meeting here shortly on the show. Beijing's current aversion to sustained high-level engagement underscores the particularly fraught nature of U.S.-Chinese relations over the past few months. What was a two-sided desire to stabilize an increasingly volatile relationship is becoming much more about Washington reaching out and the Chinese government demurring. Beijing is increasingly resentful about U.S. arms sales to Taiwan and official contacts that China says encourage Taiwan's pro-independence elements. There's always a certain degree of diplomatic theater to the canceling of high-level meetings between the U.S. and China, but ensuring stable communications with major adversaries like China and Russia has long been a U.S. preference. Some U.S. officials worry Beijing's thin-skinned diplomacy is hampering crucial communication between the rivals in a way that could have global fallout in a major crisis. A quote here. The Chinese have been reluctant to engage in discussions around the confidence building or crisis communications or hotlines, National Security Council Indo-Pacific Coordinator Kurt Campbell said at a Center for a New American Security event last week. Quote, given the fact that our forces operate in proximity, we're going to have increasing challenges. Speaking to that meeting between Republican McCarthy, he met with Taiwan President Tsai despite China's threats. It says here House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, a Republican out of California, met with Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen in California on Wednesday, despite warnings from Beijing that the meeting would provoke severe confrontation with the U.S. I'm sure they chose to meet in California rather than in Taiwan, because no doubt, very similar to how Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan angered China last year, it would probably stir things up quite a bit, having that Republican House Speaker go to China, or sorry, not China, but go to Taiwan to speak with the Taiwanese president. So no doubt they chose to meet in California to be a little less confrontational here. Why this matters. China views any gesture that seems to treat Taiwan as an independent country as an affront, and responded to a visit to Taipei last year by the then Speaker Nancy Pelosi by holding massive military drills around Taiwan and firing a missile over the island. A bullet point here: the Chinese military began military drills in the Taiwan Strait on Wednesday morning. Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense said it was monitoring the drills. So, of course, they still are lashing out by conducting more drills here. But no doubt the backlash here from China was mitigated slightly by choosing to have this meeting in California, not on Taiwanese soil. The White House has been trying to tamp down on the tensions by noting that Tsai's recent predecessors have transited through the U.S. and that Tsai herself has been to the U.S. 6 times before without much incident. Some news updating on the Chinese spy balloon. A report has come out saying that the Chinese spy balloon did, in fact, gather intelligence from sensitive U.S. military sites, despite U.S. efforts to block it, which I mentioned when I was covering the live stream of those balloons, that no doubt those balloons were communicating with satellite and were able to transmit information in real time back to China, and that no doubt some of those RC-135 Rivet Joint signals intelligence aircraft that were in the area might or might not have been deploying countermeasures to stop the balloon from being able to communicate. That could have been possible. However, in a new report that was released, it does look like those electronic signals were transmitted back to China. Let's watch this video by NBC News here and listen to what it has to say.
Mission high above the U.S. In exclusive reporting from NBC News, the Chinese spy balloon that traveled across the country for several days was able to gather intelligence passing over sensitive American military sites before it was shot down in February on President Biden's order. That's according to 2 current and 1 former senior official. Among the new findings, China steered the balloon in a figure-8 pattern at times and collected electronic signals detected from U.S. bases and weapon systems. The balloon had a remote self-destruct mechanism. Sources say it's unclear if that failed or China did not use it. The White House today.
It had a propeller, it had a rudder, it had the ability to speed up and slow down, turn. It had maneuverability.
Sources also told NBC News the balloon was able to send back intelligence to Beijing in real time.
As of right now, we're still doing an assessment of what exactly the intel was that China was able to gather.
China claims it was a commercial weather balloon.
Part of it is a test to see whether they can penetrate our airspace. Part of it is, frankly, collecting intelligence in real time.
Today, national security officials said the U.S. did take measures against the balloon that mitigated China's ability to collect sensitive U.S. data.
Let's turn now to desperate scenes like this.
So there you have it again. So it does look like there was signals intelligence collected by the Chinese from that spy balloon. I have another sister report here from the BBC, basically saying the same thing. The Chinese balloon that flew over the U.S. earlier managed to gather intelligence from those military bases for days before it was shot down. In some news related to North Korea, the U.S. flies nuclear-capable bombers amid tensions with North Korea. The United States flew nuclear-capable B-52 bombers to the Korean Peninsula again on Wednesday in a show of strength against North Korea amid concerns that the North might conduct a nuclear test. And the long-range bombers took part in joint aerial drills with U.S. and South Korean fighter jets over the Korean Peninsula, South Korea's defense ministry said. It said it was the first deployment of U.S. B-52 bombers to the peninsula in a month. The drills, quote, show the strong resolve of the South Korea-U.S. alliance and its perfect readiness to respond to any provocation by North Korea swiftly and overwhelmingly. Lieutenant General Park Hae-sik, a commander of the South Korean Air Force Operation Command, said in a statement. The South Korean and U.S. militaries have been expanding their combined military drills in response to North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. The allies conducted their biggest field exercises in 5 years and computer simulations last month. The U.S. also sent the nuclear-powered USS Nimitz aircraft carrier for joint naval training with South Korea last week and U.S.-South Korea-Japan anti-submarine drills this week. North Korea sees such drills as provocations that show its rivals' intention of attacking the North. A day after the last flight by a B-52 bomber to the peninsula on March 6th, Kim Yo-jong, the powerful sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, warned that her country was ready to take, quote, quick and overwhelming action against the United States and South Korea. In an article here from AP News, South Korea, the U.S., and Japan hold anti-North Korea submarine drills. The South Korean, U.S., and Japanese navies began their first anti-submarine drills in 6 months on Monday to boost their coordination against increasing North Korean missile threats, South Korea's military has said. The two-day drills come as North Korea's recent unveiling of a type of battlefield nuclear warhead prompted worries that the country may conduct its first nuclear test since 2017. The maritime exercises in international waters off South Korea's southern island of Jeju involved the nuclear-powered USS Nimitz aircraft carrier and naval destroyers from South Korea, the U.S., and Japan, South Korea's defense ministry said in a statement. The training was arranged to improve the three countries' capacities to respond to underwater security threats posed by North Korea's advancing submarine-launched ballistic missiles and other assets, the statement said. South Korean defense officials said the three countries were to detect and track unmanned South Korean and U.S. underwater vehicles posing as enemy submarines and other assets. Submarine-launched missiles by North Korea are serious security threats to the United States and its allies because it's harder to spot such launches in advance. In recent year, the North has been testing sophisticated underwater-launched ballistic missiles and pushing to build bigger submarines, including a nuclear-powered one. North Korea says U.S.-South Korea drills push tension to, quote, the brink of nuclear war. It says here, I'll just read you the opening paragraph here. North Korea on Thursday accused the U.S. and South Korea of escalating tensions to the brink of nuclear war through their joint military drills, vowing to respond with offensive action. That came from North Korean state media, KCNA, who reported that information. So, again, I think I've spoken about this a few times on recent shows, but we've entered this new dynamic now in our modern day, and I've been seeing this coming for probably the past 5 to 10 years. This new axis between Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. That's really what we're seeing here unfolding now in front of us over the past year. Is this new alliance between Russia and Russia's close allies, right? So you're talking like Belarus and some of its other allies, and then China and its allies, North Korea, of course, being allies of both Russia and China now, and then of course Iran. So there's this new axis that has been formed here, which is a significant security challenge for the West, for mainly the United States and Western countries. And that's kind of what we are seeing here unfold in real time. Tonight, I gave you the news on Russia, the situation between Russia and NATO. Pertaining to Finland joining the NATO bloc, etc. And then you also have, the situation with China and Taiwan, but then you also have North Korea in the middle of it all. So the U.S. is stretched very thin right now between the security crisis with Russia and Ukraine, and NATO and Russia, and then you have China, Taiwan and the U.S. and those struggles that are happening there. You have the U.S. v. North Korea again, and their struggle, there as well. And then, of course, we have Iran, which comes into play here. A statement General Mark Milley, the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, made during a House hearing last week on Iran's nuclear program alarmed Israeli defense and intelligence officials to the point they protested and asked the Biden administration for clarifications for Israeli officials told Axios. Drive the News, Milley's testifying before the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Defense said that the U.S., quote, remains committed as a matter of policy that Iran will not have a fielded nuclear weapon. The word fielded created the impression among Israeli officials that the U.S. had changed its policy on Iran and would tolerate Tehran having a nuclear weapons program, the four sources said. Quote, Milley also said it would only take Iran 2 weeks to produce enough uranium for a nuclear weapon. It would then, quote, only take several more months to produce an actual nuclear weapon, he added. Behind the scenes, senior officials in the Israeli Prime Minister's office, Ministry of Defense, IDF Foreign Ministry, and Mossad, who deal with the Iranian issue, were alarmed by Milley's remarks, the Israeli officials had said. The word fielded made the Israeli officials question whether the U.S. would allow Iran to develop a nuclear weapon as long as it didn't deploy it on a missile or other delivery system. The four Israeli officials had said the Biden administration's policy has always been based on preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. In some more Iran news here, Iran rules out the interim nuclear deal. Tehran, news out of Tehran, the latest signs indicate the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran does not have much of a pulse. The Biden administration says the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, also known as the JCPOA, is not on the agenda. However, on Monday, a report by Axios revealed that the U.S. had discussed with its European and Israeli partners an interim agreement with Iran that would include some sanctions relief if, in exchange for Tehran freezing parts of its nuclear program. A less for less deal, which All Monitor has previously reported, is based on accounts by several Israeli officials, Western diplomats, and U.S. experts, but it's quite clear that it faces long odds. Some news here from C4ISR Net. China-Russia propaganda wither as cameras multiply, says a U.S. admiral. The proliferation of cameras now in use around the world make it increasingly difficult for China and Russia to control the narrative in international disputes, according to a U.S. Navy intelligence official. Now, guys, this has directly to do with us here on this YouTube channel. Okay, I saved this this article for towards the end of the show here because it directly pertains to what we do here on the channel, what we've been doing since the start of the invasion. All right, because of the proliferation of CCTV cameras, webcams, the ability to, these IP cameras that are attached to the internet 24 hours a day. Because of the proliferation of such devices in our modern world, we now have a new ability to monitor ongoing events on the ground wherever they may be happening. Okay, so in the case of the war, we were able to see what was going on the streets of Ukraine, what the Russians were doing, where they were moving. We were able to see crimes being committed. We were able to see tragedies unfold in front of us. It's not just those live cameras, though, but every camera that we all have inside our pocket is capable of enlightening basically the entire world on what's going on in a given situation or conflict, etc. It says here, photographs and other documentation of run-ins between Chinese and Russian forces and those of other countries have proven critical to debunking propaganda, establishing factual timelines, and holding President Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin to account. Rear Admiral Mike Studman said April 5th at the Navy's League Sea Air Space Conference in National Harbor, Maryland. Among recent examples, he said, was Russian harassment of a U.S. Air Force intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance drone, which splashed into the Black Sea after an in-air collision in March. Footage captured by the MQ-9 Reaper and quickly made public showed the two Russian Su-27 jets erratically dumping fuel and the crash that ultimately forced it down. Quote, the affected party or a monitoring party essentially now is able to take that and say, this is what's really going on. China, do you stand by it? Xi Jinping, do you stand by it? This is you, right? Said Studman, commander of the Office of Naval Intelligence. Quote, there's a statement, sunlight is the best disinfectant that applies right here. Cameras have recorded alleged war crimes by Russian troops in Ukraine and intercepts of aircraft across the world. China conducted more than 100 intercepts of U.S. aircraft in international airspace between 2021 and 2023, according to Admiral's presentation at the conference. In our last, we have two more articles to go through here tonight. First is Bakhmut. Wagner raises a Russian flag, but Ukraine fights on. I mentioned this earlier in the show. There was a video released last week that reportedly showed the head of that mercenary group of Wagner raising that flag over Bakhmut City Hall. We do now know, though, that there is still fighting ongoing in the city and that Bakhmut has not yet fallen. I have a video to show you guys tonight from the Wall Street Journal, which talks a little bit about Bakhmut and the war that is happening there and kind of explains it a little bit and gives it context for those that might need a little bit further context to really what is the bloodiest and biggest battle which is going on in the Ukraine war. Let's take a look.
This is the eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut in summer 2022, and this is what it looked like half a year later. Moscow has been trying to take Bakhmut since last July, turning it into the site of the bloodiest fight of Russia's war in Ukraine. While some military analysts and Western officials have debated how important the city is to the overall conflict, both Moscow and Kyiv have doubled down on their military operations.
Контроль позволит проводить дальнейшие наступательные действия вглубь обороны ВСУ,
де виборюється наше майбутнє усіх українців.
Here's how Bakhmut turned into a political symbol for Kyiv and Moscow, and why this battle has been so difficult for both sides. Located in the highly contested Donetsk region, Bakhmut wasn't an obvious spot on the map to become one of the focal points of the war. The city does sit on a number of major roads, linking it to strategically important locations in the region. But Bakhmut itself isn't a significant transportation hub, according to some military analysts. And the city's hilly terrain makes it a difficult place to advance from.
If the Russians do eventually take Bakhmut, they will have to go over higher ground, and the Ukrainians have had plenty of time to build highly defensible positions there.
Some of those positions are in the town of Chasiv Yar, that sits on a hill around 6 miles west, where Ukrainians have been digging trenches. More can be found further west, in Kramatorsk and Slovyansk, the heavily fortified Ukrainian strongholds in Donetsk.
It's not going to be easy for the Russians from now on, even if they take the city.
This makes it unlikely that taking control of the city would be a turning point for Russia. So why have both sides continued to fight for the city? Ukrainian commanders say they aim to exhaust Russian forces there and give themselves time to prepare for offensives of their own. And for Russia, the battle has turned into a defining moment for Wagner, the mercenary group that spearheaded the Russian offensive. Thanks to them, the region surrounding the city is one of the few places where Moscow has made any major progress since last summer. But to do this, the group has invested almost its entire supply of recruits, sending waves of soldiers to near certain death. In March, a UK military advisor estimated that between 20,000 and 30,000 Russian troops have been killed or wounded in the area around Bakhmut since the start of the offensive.
Bakhmut has developed a symbolic significance far greater than the operational or strategic significance of the city.
And military analysts say Ukraine's losses, which are classified, are also increasing. Russian and Ukrainian military officials didn't respond to our request for comment on the number of casualties they've suffered in Bakhmut. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has come under criticism at home for deciding to defend Fortress Bakhmut, as he called it, despite mounting deaths. But in late March, Western officials and some military analysts said Russia's offensive in Bakhmut was losing momentum.
It may be that the Russians have effectively exhausted themselves, or it may be that the Russians are just pausing, hoping to resupply and go at it again with one final push.
Despite questions about the city's strategic importance, the large number of troops and ammunition that both sides have poured into the battle has created a military significance of its own.
The next thing really to watch will be what happens when Ukrainian forces, re-equipped with Western tanks and other sophisticated equipment, and try to take back more land occupied by the Russians.
So there you have it. A little bit about that situation that is ongoing in Bakhmut. In our final article here this evening, talks about explosion in a Russian cafe kills a prominent military blogger. Let's take a look at this video here from AP News. I was hoping that video was going to have a clip of the actual explosion, but we have one here from CNN, which I can play for you as well.
These are the extraordinary last moments of one of Russia's most controversial military bloggers at a pro-war event in a St. Petersburg cafe, receiving an unexpected gift. It's a small figurine, painted gold, wearing a combat helmet in his likeness. Investigators believe it may have been the bomb that killed him just seconds later. This was the devastation caused by the explosion, in which more than 30 other people were also injured. Security cameras caught the powerful blast tearing through the building in central St. Petersburg. Russia's calling it terrorism, accusing Ukraine of orchestrating the attack, something Kiev denies. This is Vladlen Tartarsky, the outspoken military blogger targeted and killed. With more than 500,000 subscribers to his Telegram channel, he was notorious for extremist views in his support of the war and for criticism of how it was being fought. This is him at the Kremlin last year, celebrating Russia's annexation of Ukrainian land with trademark vitriol. We will defeat everyone, he declared. We'll kill everyone and rob what we need. For him, Russia was not being hard enough in its campaign. Already, Russian police have arrested a suspect, a woman who Russian investigators named as Daria Tryopova, spotted arriving at the cafe carrying a large box shortly before the explosion. Investigators say the same woman was recorded inside the cafe after Tartarsky received the figurine, interacting with the blogger moments before the blast. She's also on camera outside the cafe as the injured evacuated the bomb site. Russian officials say Tryopova was once arrested at an anti-war protest last year, and they say she's an active supporter of the poisoned and jailed opposition leader Alexei Navalny, whose organisation the Russian authorities also accuse of involvement in the bomb attack. Navalny's supporters deny having anything to do with it. But this is not the first time Russia has been shaken by the killing of a war advocate. This was the Moscow car bomb that killed Daria Dugina last August, the outspoken daughter of a prominent Russian nationalist. The Kremlin accused Ukrainian saboteurs of this too, which Kiev denied. But now a second killing, this time in Putin's home city of St. Petersburg, shows how Russia's special military operation in Ukraine is reverberating at home.
So there you have it. Sorry about that. That was our last main article for tonight. It, again, talked about that explosion in that Russian cafe that killed that prominent pro-Russian military blogger. We'll head back over to our Situation Room. Tonight we will not be having a community aggregated section of reports because my Discord is not seeming to work. So we will save those for next week's report. We will, however, now jump into our live UA map to take a look at some of the recent events that have happened in the past 12 hours on the ground in Ukraine. So I'm going to switch over to that now. So that'll hopefully give us some insight as to what's been going on the ground in Ukraine over about the past 12 or so hours. Scrolling down to the 12-hour mark, actually I'll start at the 13-hour mark here. Russian army shelled a Nikopol district 3 times in 24 hours. You can see where that was located here on the map. And you can see some pictures here of that damage to those residential buildings that occurred in that area as a result of those shellings. 11 hours ago, Russian army shelled Berislav with artillery. One person was wounded in that region, so things heating up here in the south a little bit. 11 hours ago, Putin convened Security Council with heads of authorities of occupied regions of Ukraine. You can see a picture on screen here of that meeting. 11 hours ago, Putin at the Security Council calls to deal with the resistance at occupied territories of Ukraine. 11 hours ago, U.S. Secretary of State, what we want is a just peace in Ukraine, and we will continue to provide military aid to Kyiv. Antony Blinken, 11 hours ago, saying, we are focused on providing Ukraine with everything it needs to defend itself and recover its lands from Russia. 10 hours ago, Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs accused Ukraine in interference with Russian communication satellites, calls it unprecedented violation of international law. 8 hours ago, Russian media report Ukrainian light plane crashed in Bryansk region of Russia, pilot alive and detained. I have some photos I'll show of that really quick here in just a moment. I had some other photos besides the photos of the plane itself, but of the guy that they arrested in the plane. Let's see if I could bring those up here. One moment. Here we go. So it says here the hat finishes his story 11 out of 10 on the BS-o-meter. So some people are saying this is misinformation. I'm not exactly sure. We haven't gone to the bottom of it yet, but this was reports saying that this was a Ukrainian soldier carrying a AK-74U. Again, crashed his plane and was arrested by local authorities in Bryansk. Interesting story there. Maybe we'll have some more details on that for you guys in next week's show. We'll now start with our little bit of a Q&A here. If you haven't already, go and cast your vote in the live chat poll. Tonight's poll question is, do you think Russia will retaliate for Finland joining NATO in some shape or form? I'd love to hear your guys' opinion on this. Go ahead over to the live chat poll in the YouTube live chat. Cast your vote really quick because in about a minute, I'm going to end that poll and we will discuss the results. Miss Tiger Eye, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. So happy to see so many of y'all. Miss Tiger Eye, it's awesome to see you tuning in this evening. Glad to have you. Benny Hill, always good to see you. Ookton, good to see you. Patty Whack, thank you for tuning in tonight. Michelle Welch, it's good to see you as well. Ryan, good to see you. Kitty Gundy, good to see you as well. Speedy Squirrel says, hi, Nemico. What do you think about the impact of KSA migrating away from being friendly with the U.S. And strengthening relations with Russia, Syria, and China? So that's a tough one. I've been thinking about doing a video on this very subject, actually. So I think in the end, we're going to see a lot of this from a lot of different countries, right, going forward. We're kind of already seeing it with Honduras kind of moving away from relations with Taiwan in order to strengthen ties with China. They're doing that. They're doing that for their economy. To some degree, some of these smaller countries want to stay alive. Of course, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is no doubt not a small country. The reason that they're doing that, though, is because they're focused on their economy. They're focused on what's going to be more secure for them moving forward economically. And so I think that's a really big part of it. And that's why Honduras is kind of pulling away from Taiwan to be more friendly with China. It's because they're doing that to keep their economy intact. And they're doing what they think is smart for them moving forward. I think we're going to start to see a lot of that, unfortunately, on both sides. We'll see we'll see countries that might have not sided so much with the U.S. We might see them flip over towards the U.S. and we'll probably see quite a few countries that have sided with the U.S. Flip sides over to the East, China to Russia, and try to ally with them. We've seen that a lot in a lot of Middle Eastern, a lot of African countries as well. Michelle Welch says, hi, Nemico. Hello to you, Michelle. Sydney Pruden, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. The great Hodid says, my family and I say hello. I finally got them to drop the Fox and go with Nemico. Thank you so much, great Hodid. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Hodud? Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I'm glad to hear you got your family off the old Fox News network and over here on the Nemico watching us over here, hanging out with us here in the live streams. Thank you guys for tuning in and being with us. Ryan says, I think the U.S. dollar is too big to be hurt right now, but eventually it could impact us. So, yeah, there has been a lot of news about the U.S. dollar over the past week or two here, and I think we're going to start to see unfortunately, I think we're going to see that start to snowball over time. And so, again, that's definitely something we're going to have to keep an eye on. Jaltable says the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, aka the gas station, literally. So, I mean, you got to think about it there. I mean, if they're looking, what's going to be smart for them moving forward economically, it's about where they're selling their gas, who they have these ties with, who they have these economic dealings with. So that's a really big part of what impacts those decisions. Speedy Squirrel says this impacts us here in a big way. I'd like to hear more about that from you at some point, Speedy Squirrel. Benny Hill says prices of e-bikes went up. Yeah, I mean, I could see anything with a lithium battery going up. Justby says, what did Russia say about Finland joining? The same stuff. Basically, they've made threats of possible retaliation. However, nothing specific as of this time. Patty Wax says gas prices going up right in time for summer. Yeah, I guarantee we're going to see a gas price increase here, guys. So if you have storage capability for storing fuel, I highly recommend it. It's always smart to buy your fuel when it's low. Buy your gas while the prices are low, and then you don't have to use it while the prices are high. So use your storage up while your prices are high, and buy it to store when the prices are low. I'm going to go ahead and end off that poll tonight for tonight's poll question, which was, again, do you think Russia will retaliate in some shape or form in relation to Finland joining NATO? I'm waiting for the poll results to come in here in the live chat, but it's taking its sweet time. There we go. So we had an overwhelming 60% said yes, 40% said no. So about 60% of you think that Russia is going to retaliate in some shape or form for Finland joining NATO. Again, only time will tell. My personal opinion is I think we will probably see something. I can't really say specifically what that is or what that'll look like, but we will probably see something, some form of retaliation here. Speedy Scroll says KSA under new management, so to speak, trying to change things up and show power. Dupai says, how long can you store gas? I'm pretty sure you can store it for quite a while if you have fuel stabilizers in it. I think just alone, gas stays good for, as Patty Wax says, maybe a few years. But I think if you stabilize it, if you use good fuel stabilizers, you could probably get it to last longer, I would imagine. I mean, I know I've used I've had gas sitting in the shed for years, and I've used it in small engines and never had any issues with it. As long as it's sealed and as long as you put some fuel stabilizers in it. GoFlow says, I'll be interested to see how much the economic impact of the three events now and in the next couple of years have on digital currency, potentially bringing that into a more regular usage method. It could possibly. However, I think I might have spoken about this a few times before. I used to be a big crypto guy myself, a big digital currency guy, but the systems which are in place, that power digital currencies such as Bitcoin and a lot of the other sub-currencies, as I'd like to call them, they're flawed systems in and of themselves. So they have their fair share of flaws, just like the traditional fiat currencies, which we use today. such as the U.S. dollar, etc. You know, they all have their flaws. I do believe eventually a digital currency that is without these flaws will come along. Again, who knows when that will be, though. Ryan says, I don't think they'll actually attack Finland. They don't want to tread down the Article 5 road. Yeah, of course they won't. I don't think they'll attack Finland at all, but again, it remains to be seen exactly what type of action they'll take. With that, guys, it about sums up our Q&A for this evening. I'm pushing my my time limit here for this evening, but I thank everybody that stopped by for tonight's news report. You can tune in every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our weekly Intel report. We cover, again, everything from Ukraine to all global security issues which are happening in the world. Again, big thank you to everybody that took some time out of your day to be here with us. If you haven't already, make sure to hit that like button. Best way to get the algorithm's attention. Subscribe if you haven't already. If you're following along on Twitch, make sure to hit that follow button. Again, for those who don't know, we dual stream to both Twitch and YouTube. I want to hear your comments, guys. Leave the comments in the live chat. When we upload this as a video, go over there. Leave us a comment. I read them all. I love reading your guys' comments. I read your guys' emails or messages on Discord as well. I love reading it. Keep sending them my way, and I'll respond to as many of your questions and comments as I possibly can. If you like this information, if you like this content, share this stream, share this channel with your friends and family. It's the best way to get this information in the hands of more people. We have a Discord server. There's a link to that in the description below. I highly recommend, if you haven't already, to join our community Discord server. We'd love to have you guys over there to join in on the communication, on the discussion that is, again, happening there 24/7. And we also have a great resource over there for keeping up to date on what's going on in Ukraine, not just Ukraine, but what's going on in the global security environment. So, again, it's a great resource, an excellent tool. Speaking of tools, we have a whole list over there of our open source intelligence tools that we use to collect this information, to aggregate this data for you guys. So, I highly recommend going and checking those out. If you're into open source intelligence, it's a great resource for finding new tools and resources for getting into open source intelligence. I think that about sums it up. We'll be back here next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Consider supporting the channel, guys. There's links to our merch and everything down in the description below. Every little bit helps us continue to bring this reporting to you. I have a ton of videos in the works that I'm going to be bringing to you guys over the course of the summer. Shorts, been trying to get back on the train here, so to speak, and getting those shorts pumped out for you guys. We have our weekly Intel summary video, which is edited by some of our community members, which is posted to the channel every day. Shout out to those guys. You know who you are. The one that has been doing the editing the most has chosen to stay anonymous, but he's been doing a great job editing those weekly summary videos. So big shout out to you. Thank you so much for that. I think that about sums it up. I'm going to be back here next week, guys, with a big, juicy report with you. Got a whole bunch of special stuff planned for that, so stay tuned for next week's report, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on Nemico Network. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I think that about sums it up. You have been watching Nemico Network.
Something that will change our daily lives, that will change history, 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 that will change history. That will be the most beautiful day.